So here we are at Emily's martial arts studio, Determination Martial Arts in the East End of Hamilton. Hey Emily, how are you?
Great, how are you?
I'm awesome. How long have you been teaching martial arts, both here and other places?
Okay, so we've been open here for almost a year, which is really exciting. And then I've been teaching martial arts since I was 16, and I'm 27 now, so a little while.
Very cool. A lot of your students are adults. I know you have quite a range. You have everything from little tiny kids to adults. You have a number of students with special needs. But I'm really curious today about how you engage with the adults. So tell me what you like about teaching adult students.
So adults come at the end of my day after I've taught the rest of the kids, which is a really nice change. These kids are high energy, they like to do lots of different things, they need a lot of reminders on how to stay on task and what's appropriate behavior. And generally we expect that that's not the same in adults. So when I get to my adults class, I can get the same level of enthusiasm and excitement going, but I don't have to rely so much on doing the general habits of here's how we keep our hands to ourselves and here's why we don't use martial arts on people, and we can just have some discussions about what is self-defense and why do we need it and what experiences have people had in their lives that have brought them here or not brought them here earlier.
Okay, so for the next couple of questions, I'm thinking less specifically about martial arts and more about your experiences with your adult students' overall approach to learning something that is presumably new for them. So in other words, thinking about them as adult learners. So what are some of the challenges that come with teaching adults?
So there's a couple of challenges, and some of them are dependent on myself as the teacher, and some I think are just as an adult in general. So I'm not a particularly large person, and being a female in martial arts, that also presents some challenges with adult learning, because a lot of men especially have an initial reaction of, I'm not sure that I want to learn from you. And I've had a couple come in and talk to me and leave, and two of them have come back to apologize for their initial assumptions on what I would be like as a teacher, and are wonderful students in my class now. So I think the first thing adults have to get past is their judgments of other people, which is natural for everybody. We go into a situation and we make a snap judgment, but adults have to be able to step back and decide, do they want to do this thing regardless? Do they feel comfortable in the space? Do they feel respected in the space? So getting people to just appreciate that this is a space where I'm not trying to take control, I'm going to lead, but they have some free chance, they can express their values and opinions in here. And then the other thing is that they're doing something new in martial arts they've seen in movies, and they've seen these crazy huge stunts, and they've watched their boxers on TV. And then I start with like, okay, let's put our hands in front and start in an attention stance. Like, but I want to do the cool flashy things. And patience is a hard thing for everybody, and you have to be able to start down at the basics. So being able to teach a couple of really flashier moves that are simple at the beginning, so they can see, okay, I can get here, and then going back to the basics of why it's important to start up.
Very cool. What do you think are the most difficult things for adults to learn? And I guess you started to talk about that, but what's really at the heart of what's tough for them?
So one of the things in martial arts is patterns or forms, or kata, depending on where you're coming from, and that's a set of movements together. And we don't often require, especially with all our tablets and smartphones and things, people to just stop and orient themselves and then remember a set of moves in a specific order. And so adults that aren't doing other activities get this thing where I'm asking them to move 4 different directions with different techniques, and they get overwhelmed, and then they get embarrassed that they're overwhelmed and frustrated, and have to just step back and say, like, this isn't something I'm doing on a regular basis. This isn't something that's part of my daily life. This is why I'm here. And then we go over how it's part of a fight and how we put all those steps together. And then they make beautiful patterns, and they become super intense and fierce, and everything's fun.
You mentioned a little bit about their frustration. I wondered if you could say a little bit about their self-concept, about how they see themselves. Does that help them learn martial arts, or does it ever get in the way?
So part of it can be a motivator. It can be a motivator or a detractor. Everybody's different. But lots of students will start to get frustrated with something, and the idea is we create a community within class, so that if somebody sees somebody frustrated, they get a little motivation from somebody. And that can really help, having the belt system, so a higher belt come over and say, yeah, I remember when it took me 3 months to get this. And a little bit of empathy goes a long way. And we hope that that carries over into everyday life, so adults that come in feeling like they're isolated and alone start to learn that if you reach out to your community, you get that support back. The frustration can also be somebody who just thinks they do 5 minutes of class and they walk off the floor, I can't do this, this isn't for me. Generally, I can just go with them and sit for a second or two and we can talk about, it's because they've never succeeded in a sport, or they didn't think they were an athlete, or they used to be an elite athlete and they've gained weight, or they got injured, and then coming back is hard for anybody. And being able to say, like, you're a white belt. White belts are not expected to know anything. White belts are not expected to be good. That's why we have a belt system in martial arts. So you are at the belt level that you are. If you were good, I wouldn't want you in my class because I wouldn't have you as a white belt. And we can kind of move on that situation, and generally we can calm those frustrations. Sometimes 5 minutes of class is all we get that day. We come back and try again.
So it sounds like some of your efforts go into things around esteem building to help them build their confidence to try stuff.
Definitely.
Do you want to say anything more about that, about other techniques for doing that? Or
I think it comes down to the same of being, teaching is never just about the thing that you are teaching. And so if I'm teaching a block to somebody, I'm not really concerned so much when they begin if they've got their thumb tucked out and they've got it on an angle and it's right above their head. I'm more concerned if they're able to look at the situation and step and move and feel like they know what they've done. So I don't want them just like, here's my arms coming. They have to know that there's something smashing their head, they're walking into that, and they're blocking it. And then feel good about their ability to now have this skill that might help them. And it might never be applied, but you can walk around feeling a little more confident. So giving backgrounds on techniques helps there.
So you teach martial arts. Are there things your students need to learn about themselves in order to learn martial arts skills?
From the basics, so we say martial arts is mind, body, spirit. And so body comes first. And so when you very, very begin, you don't really have to do much deeper. You have to make your body do what your body needs to do. You have to get on the floor, don't think, do. And then, so that covers body. And then mind starts to come into it. So we start to think, why we're doing it, what's going on. And they have to start looking at themselves. Am I an aggressor? Am I somebody who steps back from situations? Am I somebody who feels like I can take a lead? Am I somebody who doesn't ever take a lead? Because you need to know, what are you going to do in a fight? There's always an option. Are you going forward? Are you going backwards? You have to know, am I going to call someone out on their behavior? Am I going to go call somebody for help? You have to choose one of those options. And then spirit comes into it at the end. So are you being the person who's taking everybody under your wing and organizing tournaments or activities or socials? Are you the person who, when a new student comes in, you're welcoming them? Are you the person who's now in your community doing some volunteering because you've learned what an impact it can have, or how many youth are suffering from assaults? Are you a person who's advocating online? Or are you a person who your whole life is falling apart and you're stressed, and this is your safe space? This is where you come and you de-stress and you have a community and you no longer feel so isolated. And I think that is what people start to look towards when they're getting their black belt. Why do I do this?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure meeting you all.
So we're here this morning at Gail Schmidt's barn, Vernity, where she teaches classical dressage. And it occurred to me, Gail, I should ask you a little bit about what is classical dressage, just in brief.
Classical dressage, it goes back to the basics of our interactions with horses, and basically we become our horse's calisthenics teacher or personal trainer and work at developing the horse itself as an athlete.
Cool. Thank you for that. So how long have you had this barn and been teaching dressage here?
I've been here 16 years.
Wow, okay. The majority of your students, I think, are adults. I know you teach some kids as well. What makes the adults good students? What do you enjoy about teaching them?
What I enjoy most about teaching adults is they get the importance of the basis of learning about horse rider interaction. Kids sometimes are just here for the thrill factor, and a lot of times the adults are really keen on learning, whereas sometimes the kids not so much.
So for the next few questions, I'm not thinking as much about the specifics of learning riding as your adult students' overall approach to learning something that might be new for them. So in other words, thinking about them as adult learners. What are some of the challenges that come with teaching adults?
I've actually just started working with a new student just this last couple of weeks, and she's 67, so she's got a big incompetence issue because she feels she's too old. And I'm a big believer that everybody can learn and everybody can do it. So that sometimes is a challenge with adults. The other thing is sort of getting them to step back. Our lives are really busy, and you need to be able to sit back and think and totally immerse yourself in the learning when it comes to classical dressage, and sometimes their lives are too busy to sort of take that step, and it helps. I help them do that.
So you mentioned you have a 67-year-old who's new to this. Do you have adult students who've done versions of riding before, and how does that impact their learning what you're teaching?
Yeah, if they come to me having already learned how to ride somewhere else, classical riding is a little bit different because you're having to really understand and interact with the horse, and they have to unlearn a lot of what they've been taught other places that don't take that interaction into account so much. So that can take a little bit of time. Muscle memory is hard to get rid of.
Okay. So you sort of answered my next question, was what gets in the way of their learning, but I'm wondering if there's other sort of interpersonal characteristics, like things just inside them that block them learning something new.
Taking the time to actually listen to what I'm saying. A lot of times there's the assumption that they know, particularly with people that have learned to ride somewhere else, that they know what I'm talking about and don't really listen to what I'm saying. And that way kids are really good because they have no preconceived notions.
Right.
So they listen, if they are listening, to what I say and do it. Where sometimes adults sort of try to twist what I've given them into what they already know without really listening to what I'm saying and how it's different from what they may really be doing.
So I'm curious, what would be the personality of the ideal adult student for you?
Oh.
And I'm not thinking that maybe you've ever had one, but what?
Well, you just need somebody that is really open to listen to what you say and don't carry around the baggage with them. Somebody that doesn't do anything else but riding would probably be ideal, but that doesn't really exist in our world. But that would be the biggest thing, is getting them to let go of the rest of their life when they come here.
So how do you help them overcome those challenges? Are there approaches you use in your teaching that you think about addressing that, or?
Getting them to breathe properly is a big one. I try to talk to them about a lot of things to get them to familiarize themselves with everything. I go slowly. One of the biggest things too, if I get somebody that hasn't ridden, they're quite anxious about horses. So I spend a lot of time working with them on the ground so that they become comfortable with the horse before actually getting on their back. I find that makes a big difference, even with kids, but particularly with adults who are nervous.
Right. And I think you mentioned once before about using analogies that would help them sort of think about stuff they already knew.
Yeah, I do draw a lot on common things that people may not relate to horseback riding. Basketball, I often talk about dressage and the NBA because there's a lot of similarities between basketball and horseback riding or dressage.
Okay, what would those be for people who might never have thought of that before?
That you have to keep riding the same way you have to keep dribbling. You have to be able to walk and dribble. You have to be able to ride and ride. Like, you have to be able to continue to work with your horse at the same time as doing something else. I've got a piano player as a student, and I use the analogy of being able to work the pedals, work your right hand and the left hand, all doing different things, but all work together to bring together the beautiful symphony. And I use, a lot of analogies like that.
So you teach riding, and you obviously have lots of interesting tricks for getting people. Are there other things your students need to learn about themselves in order to ride?
Yeah, they have to believe in themselves, believe that they can do it. A lot of times people don't think that they're able to do it, and they really can. They just have to stop trying to put the energy towards saying they can't do it and just let it happen. Is one of the biggest things I try to help people do, is realize that yes they can. And anybody can, and anybody can get better. maybe not all at the same rate, but that really shouldn't matter.
Well, you've got lots of older students that would be evidence of that. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say?
No, just keep calm and ride on.
Appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're here at Tom Schilling's studio, where he teaches people to sing, amongst other things. So Tom, just to start off, how long have you been teaching singing?
About 45 years.
So I understand the majority of your students are adults. What do you enjoy about teaching adults? And I guess what I mean is, what makes them good or interesting students?
I think that their experience in life is very part of them, and I'm trying to get them to see that there is another aspect of their life which they haven't touched. And it starts to open them up more.
Okay. For the next couple of questions, I want to focus more on them as learners. So thinking about things that they have challenges with and so on. So, you know, you teach a lot of people from different places. What are things that are challenges for adult students to learn?
Probably breathing is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, well, what else?
Because we breathe shallowly, and it takes a while to understand where the throat is. And it's a perception that we have. Where we got it from is our own experience, but we have to introduce a new experience. An experience that the body is much more capable and much more open than we live. We live rather shallowly.
So it sounds like the replacing the old with the new is challenging for
Yes,
people.
yes. Children, we've talked about it. Children do it. They just breathe naturally, but we've sort of think we have to do something special to make it happen, and actually we have to give that thought up because it should happen naturally.
So for some of your students, or maybe many of them, what gets in the way of that, of learning that?
The mind, mainly.
You say more about that?
Yeah, they think too much about breathing. You do not wake up at night and see if you're breathing, because your body knows how to breathe. But there's a depth to the breath that we do not do during the course of the day. There's anxiety, there's fear, there's apprehension, there's doubt. And we're trying to erase that until the mind becomes more childlike, not childish, childlike. So that we give up and let the body do what it was meant to do.
So that sounds a lot easier than it probably is for most people.
Yes, that is not an easy proposition.
What do you do? What strategies do you have to help people get through that?
Probably the first thing is in singing is, where does the air come into the body? Most people think that the throat is here. The throat is not here. The throat is back there. So that is a really revelation to most people. And the air has to come through the windpipe, which is back here. This is the food pipe. They know this one very well. But this one, very unacquainted with. Because this is what helps open the body.
And you use a lot of metaphor, I
Yes.
think, in your teaching.
You have to use metaphors because this is not something you can explain. And we're in a world now that wants everything in black and white. They want to explain everything. You can't explain this. You can only feel it. And we have to return people to feeling things rather than so-called knowing things. Just because you're intellectual doesn't mean you can feel it. But if we can combine the two, if we can get the intellect to understand that it is an imaginary thing, not something that is solidly in place. It's like, oh, okay. It goes into another realm. It's a fourth dimension, actually. Not daydreaming. Daydreaming is different. That's done with the mind. Imagination is done with the brain, which is here, the mind is here.
Hmm.
So we want to be back in this place.
So you teach people how to sing, but obviously from what you're saying, you're teaching them many other things. Are there things that people need to learn about themselves in order to be able to learn how to sing?
I think that they will learn about themselves if they're allowed to let it happen. You don't figure out who you are. Because evolving means that you allow things to appear in your imagination, and there's an aha moment, say, oh, that's different. But we can't go through textbooks and try to do what we think we should become. We have to let it evolve. And evolving is something we have to get the mind out of the way of, because it's trying to explain everything. And you can't explain it. And that gets very frustrating. The mind gets very, very frustrated. Because it wants to figure everything out. So metaphors are so important. Just a suggestion can make the whole difference in how we feel, how we appear. And gets us really out of the way.
Thank you.